and welcome back to my channel. My name's Andrea, and as you may have noticed, I've taken a little bit of a break to have my baby. No longer pregnant. So I am about 12 days postpartum, and you might hear little baby Avalon in the background there. He was born at 37 weeks, and we had to induce. So I wanted to share a little bit, hold on a second. I wanted to share a little bit about our birth story because it didn't go as according to plan. Yeah. So I ended up developing preeclampsia at 35 weeks of pregnancy. It started out actually as gestational hypertension, and my blood pressure was just creeping up slowly towards the end of pregnancy. And my doctor was really concerned that it would result in preeclampsia. So we were watching my blood pressure very closely. And after about a week of doing 2 non-stress tests a week to make sure baby was doing okay. So my doctor was watching my blood pressure very closely. I was going to several appointments a week. We had 2 non-stress tests scheduled each week so that they could monitor baby's heartbeat and to make sure that there was good heart rate variability while he was still inside. And then we also were checking my blood pressure. I was checking it at home daily, and I was also having to go to the doctor at least once a week to see my doctor. So I was being very closely monitored, and as things progressed and we got to week 36, my doctor noticed my blood pressure was still creeping up and had told me that I might want to take some blood pressure medication. So at that point, I was going to start blood pressure medication, but ended up getting a really high blood pressure reading. So we decided that my blood pressure was pretty high and that I should go to the OB triage actually. And because they had told me that if my blood pressure was ever 160 over 110, if either of those numbers was higher than that, that I should go to OB triage. So on Sunday, we went to OB triage and they ended up keeping me. So from there, we noticed that the baby was having a couple decelerations, which means that his heart rate would suddenly drop and it wasn't recovering as quickly as they would like. So they decided that I needed to be monitored, as well as my blood pressure being very high. So they gave me blood pressure medication and admitted me to antepartum, which is, I guess, where you go before you deliver if you have to be hospitalized. And so we stayed in antepartum Sunday night, Monday night. So the doctors on call really wanted me to do an induction at 36 weeks and 6 days. But I really didn't want to because my doctor, who I really love, happened to be out of town for the weekend. It was a long weekend of Martin Luther King's birthday. So my doctor, they were going to be out of town until Tuesday. So I was really trying to hold out for that. But the doctors were urging me that I was at risk of having a stroke and ended up telling me that I would either need to do a C-section or induction as soon as possible. And I finally asked them to consult with my doctor and then report back to me on what my doctor thought was best. So on Monday night or Monday afternoon, I moved from antepartum into labor and delivery, and we started the induction process. For me, the induction process was first it's called the Cook catheter instead of the Foley balloon, which you might have heard of. The Cook catheter has 2 parts to it. So there's the part that goes inside and underneath the cervix, which then helps to flatten it. So it took about, I guess, about 12 hours. The next morning, we were able to take the Cook catheter out, which meant that I was dilated 3 or so centimeters. between 3 and 5 centimeters. From there, we started Pitocin. Now, because of my high blood pressure and my risk of having a stroke and the decelerations that baby Avalon was having, they wanted to put me on magnesium drip. And this is a super high dose of magnesium, and it makes you feel really, really sick. So it was not ideal. It also softens all your muscles, relaxes all your muscles, so it makes the uterine stop contracting. So it's a kind of a double issue, because not only do you feel like absolute crap, but then you have to up dose the Pitocin to then get contractions moving. From there, I moved pretty quickly through early labor into active labor, and my doctor was still out of town. At this point, it was Tuesday afternoon, and I had been taking hypnobirthing classes up until my induction and completed a 5-week course just days before I was admitted to the hospital. So I used the rainbow relaxation on a speaker during early active labor. And then really the thing that was most helpful was my husband was using counter pressure, which the nurse, who was amazing. We didn't end up having a doula, but this nurse that ended up being our nurse throughout labor was incredible, and they taught my husband how to do counter pressure measures, where he was able to push on my low back and squeeze my hips together all throughout labor, throughout each contraction. I also did use the comb every single contraction. I don't know if you've heard about having a comb that you can squeeze in your hand, because it really does distract you from the pain of the contraction. So everyone was really surprised at how quickly things began to move, because my induction was successful, and they really weren't expecting it to be, mostly because I was on that magnesium drip. Fast forward, and about 4 p.m. on Tuesday, January 20th, my doctor arrives, and I'm so happy they're there, but I can't really show it because I'm in a whole lot of pain. At this point, I'm almost ready to move into the transition phase, where my doctor, for about an hour, we worked in active labor, pushing the baby down, and then we ended up getting into transition, where he was in the vaginal canal. Now, I pushed for 2 hours while he was in the vaginal canal, and that was extremely exhausting. Between the magnesium drip that I was still on, I was hooked up to all kinds of machines, even though I only wanted intermittent fetal monitoring. But those things were no longer an option. I could not use the bath because of the magnesium drip, because it makes you very weak, and they also because of my high blood pressure. So that was disappointing. I couldn't use that for pain management. I did not want to do an epidural. I wanted to have a natural vaginal birth. So fast forward, we're in transition for 2 hours. I'm losing lots of blood, almost a liter of blood loss. The doctor's starting to get nervous because we're starting to see some decelerations while Avalon is in the vaginal canal, which kind of freaked the doctor out. They really wanted to get him out quickly. At that point, it was becoming kind of urgent. Even though my doctor said that people can push between 2 and 4 hours in transition, especially if you have an epidural, which I still never had an epidural. But in this case, his heart rate was dropping, and it was very concerning. So at this point, doctor decided that it would be best for us to use the vacuum, which is not so much a vacuum, but a suction. And they put a suction cup at the top of his head. We could see his head just almost about to crown. They brought a mirror and everything, and I could see that, but I still just was not able to push enough to get him completely out on my own. So the vacuum helped, because they suctioned it to his head, and then we pushed and sucked at the same time. So I pushed, and the doctor, we would count. And in 3 pushes, he was out. So that was a relief, because I was starting to get really nervous that something was going to happen. My doctor had informed me that if the vacuum didn't work, that we would have to immediately rush to C-section, which I had done a lot of work to avoid C-section. And I had already done so much of the hardest part of labor. So I really didn't want it to result in that. But I knew that I just needed a little bit of help, and that once they had the vacuum on him, that he would come out very quickly. So when he came out, he his heart rate totally stabilized and everything was fine. He did have a little bit more of a cone head and kind of a little bruise on the top of his head, as well as like a tiny little scab, but that went away within a couple days. Actually, after in postpartum, I had to stay 2 days instead of one, which for vaginal delivery, you normally only have to stay one night. They put me on another magnesium drip, which continued to make me feel like absolute crap. I finally went home after 2 nights in postpartum. So at this point, I had Sunday night, the 18th, Monday, the 19th, Tuesday, the 20th, the day he was born, Wednesday, postpartum, Thursday, postpartum, came home Thursday morning. And then, unfortunately, on Saturday, my blood pressure was spiking. I ended up having a blood pressure of 179 over 113. I checked it like 3 times over the course of 2 hours, and it was really elevated. I ended up being admitted to emergency and readmitted to postpartum for 2 more nights. So really, all told, it was just about a week in the it was just about a week at the hospital from Sunday through to the following Monday with that little reprieve at home. So anyways, that was the story. I just wanted to share that with you because it doesn't always go as planned. In fact, I'm told it rarely goes according to plan. So all that to say that wherever you find yourself at the time of your delivery is where you need to be. I think it was hardest for me to accept that I might have to do things differently than I had envisioned. I really envisioned that I would use the bath for pain management, which was inside the suite. I also really envisioned that my doctor would be there for the entire delivery, who I'd built such a strong foundational relationship with. I had envisioned that I would not need to be induced and do 0 medication. Fortunately, I did not use any pain medication, so that I still was able to accomplish. I was also able to accomplish a vaginal delivery, which was really important to me. My doctor was there for the end of the delivery, which I was really grateful for, but I had to be prepared that someone else could be delivering my baby. And just in those circumstances, that was just really not a choice I could make because I couldn't just keep holding out. Like, we really were at risk, me and the baby. So basically all of that is that I still wouldn't have changed a thing. Like, as hard as it was, I think that it all happened how and unfolded how it wanted to. I still felt really empowered by my medical team to choose not to have a C-section, to put things off as much as I could before there was finally a point where we were like, okay, this is getting really serious, and at this point we need to just move forward with the information that we have and the support that we are receiving. So I also think it's really important to have your partner be on the same page as you if you plan to work with someone who is going to help you birth the baby. My husband was integral to the whole process. He almost never left my side, even for like a brief moment to go pee. For him to use the restroom, I was like panicked that he was gone. So he was like very on the entire labor, which really active labor was probably from like Tuesday morning till 7 p.m. So a good 12 hours he was nonstop, consistently with me, working with me through each contraction. And furthermore, he was really encouraging and supportive of the decisions I was making. If at any point I think that he said, you know, babe, we just got to move forward, like, you just got to have this baby, you just got to induce, I would have caved earlier. And I know it sounds silly, but I really, really, really wanted to have my doctor deliver the baby because that trust relationship was so important to me, especially because I had opted not to have a doula since I had such a great foundational relationship with my doctor. So I think at the end of the day, my tips would be have some really good, hard conversations with your partner, your birthing partner, before delivery to make sure that you are on the same page and that they are supportive of your point of view, or if they're not, that they will work that out with you before delivery, because you really don't want to be in that position during delivery. 2, that you trust in your care team. Even though my doctor wasn't present for the majority of the process, I trusted my care team at Swedish. I knew that they were in communication with my doctor and that my doctor had basically okayed the things that they were asking me to do. And I started to develop a relationship with the doctors that were on during my delivery, which I also think was a really important key thing. So that's another aspect. And then lastly, I think it was really important for me to listen to my intuition. Those were the wishes and desires that I had. I really didn't want to do an epidural. I really wanted a vaginal birth. Those were like my two number ones. Like C-section was definitely very like a absolutely last resort. The things that I couldn't control that ended up coming into play that I struggled with were inducing. I really didn't want to induce any sooner than 37 weeks, so we did that pretty much on the dot. The other thing that I really didn't want to do was use Pitocin because, you know, it was more painful, causing everything to be more difficult. The magnesium drip was horrible. I ended up being on magnesium drip 3 times, first in antepartum, then during active labor, and then again in postpartum when I got readmitted the second time. So all that to say, you know, things don't go according to plan. I think you have to expect the unexpected, but it's really important to lay strong foundation for yourself before you get into the situation. So trusting your care team, building that trust with your care team, or maybe having a doula if you do not have that type of trust with your care team, making sure that you and your birthing partner are on the same page, and being willing to pivot when you need to, because I definitely had to pivot on several occasions throughout this process. And rigidity, there were points that I just realized that rigidity wasn't going to help me figure out, or rigidity wasn't going to help me or the baby, that I needed to be adaptable and that I needed to go with what was happening and embrace what I was being told. And regardless of whether it was difficult or not, which obviously it was. So anyways, I hope this is really helpful to you, hearing a story of someone who went through hypnobirthing course and who implemented hypnobirthing philosophy and who had a natural vaginal birth with some unexpected complications. Okay, thanks everyone. Have a wonderful day and bless